The Complete Works of Swami Vivekananda, Volume 2, Soul, Nature, and God. According to Vedanta philosophy, man consists of three substances. So to say, the outermost is the body, the gross form of man, in which are the instrument of sensation, such as eyes, nose, ears, and so forth. This eye is not an organ of vision. It is only the instrument. Behind that is the organ. So the ear are not the organ of hearing. They are the instrument, and behind them there is an organ. Or what in modern philosophy is called as center, has the center. The organ are called indriyas in Sanskrit. If the center which governs the eye is destroyed, the eyes will not see. So with all our senses, the organs again cannot sense anything by themselves until there is something else is attached to them. That something is the mind. Many times you have observed that you are deeply engaged in certain thoughts and the clock strikes. You will not hear it. Why? The ear was there, vibration entered in and were carried to the brain. Yet you did not hear because the mind was not joined to the organ. The impression of the external object are carried to the organs, and when the mind is attached to them, it takes the impression and gives them, as it were, a coloring, which is called egoism, that is, I. Take the case of mosquito biting me on the finger when I am engaged in some other work. I do not feel it because my mind is joined in something else. Later, when my mind is joined to the impression conveyed to the indriyas, a reaction comes. With this reaction, I become conscious of the mosquito. So even the mind joined itself to the organ is not sufficient. There must come the reaction in the form of will. This faculty from which the reaction comes, the faculty of knowledge or intellect, is called as buddhi. First, there must be an external instrument. Next, the organ. Next, the mind must join itself to the organ. Then must come the reaction of the intellect. And when all these things are complete, there immediately flashes the idea. I and the external object, and there is a perception, a concept, knowledge. The external organ, which is only the instrument, is in the body, and behind that is the internal organ, which is finer. Then there is the mind, then the intellectual faculty, then egoism, which says I see, I hear, and so forth. The whole process is carried on by certain forces. You may call them vital forces. In Sanskrit, they are called as pran. This gross part of man, this body in which are the external instrument, is called in Sanskrit as Stula Sharir, that is the gross body. Behind it comes the series beginning with the organ, mind, intellect, and the egoism. This and the vital forces form the compound which is called as fine body, that is Sukshma Sharira. These forces are composed of very fine elements, so fine that no amount of injury to this body can destroy them. They survive all shocks given to this body. The gross body we see is composed of gross material, and as such, it is always been renewed and changing continuously. But the internal organs, the mind, the intellect, and the egoism are composed of the finest material, so fine that they will endure for ions and ions. They are so fine that they cannot be resisted by anything. They can get through any obstructions. The gross body is non-intelligent. The gross body is non-intelligent. So is the fine, being composed of fine matter. Although one part is called mind, another intellect, and third is egoism. Yet we see at the glance that no one of them can be a knower. Yet no one of them be can called as knower. None of them can be the perceiver, the witness, the one for whom action is made, who is the seer of this action. All this movement in the mind or in the faculty of intelligence or in egoism must be for someone else. This being composed of a fine matter cannot be self-effulgent. cannot be self-effulgented. Their luminosity cannot be in themselves. This manifestation of the table, for instance, cannot be due to any material thing. Therefore, there must be some one behind all, who is the real manifester, the real sharer, the real enjoyer, and he in the Sanskrit is called as Atman, the soul of man, the real self of man. He, it, it is who really sees things. The external instrument and the organ catches the impression and convey them to the mind, and the mind to the intellect, and intellect reflect them has on a mirror and back to it is the soul that looks on them and gives his order and his direction. He is the ruler of all these instruments and the master of in the house, the enthroned king in the body, the faculty of egoism, the faculty of intellection, the faculty of cognition, the organs, the instrument, the body, and all of them obey his commands. It is he who is manifesting of this. This is the Atman of man. Similarly, we can say that what is in a small part of the universe must also be in the whole universe. If conformate if conformity is the law of the universe, if conformity is the law of the universe, every part of the universe must have been built on the same plane as the whole. So we naturally think that behind the gross material form, which we call this universe of ours, there must be a universe of fine material or fine matter, which we call thoughts. And behind that, there must be a soul, which makes all these thoughts possible, which commands, which is in the enthroned king of this universe. That soul, which is behind each mind and each body, is called as Pratyagat, Pratyagat, Pratyaga Atma, Pratyag, Pratyagatma, the individual Atma, Pratyag Atma. Individual Atma. That and that soul which is behind the universe at it as its guide, ruler, and governor is God. The next thing to consider is whence all these things come. The answer is what is meant by coming. If it means that something can be produced out of nothing, it is impossible. All this creation, manifestation cannot be produced out of zero. Nothing can be produced without a cause, and the effect is but the cause reproduced. Here is a glass. Suppose we break it to pieces and pulverize it, and by means of chemicals almost annihilate it. Will it go back to the zero? Certainly not. The form will break, but the particles of which it is made will be there. They will go beyond for our senses, but they remain. And it is quite possible that out of this material, another glasses may be made. If this is true in one case, it will be so in every case. Something cannot be made out of nothing, nor can something be made or made to go back to nothing. It may become finer and finer, and then again grosser and grosser. The raindrop is drawn from the ocean in the form of vapor and drift away through the air to the mountains. There it changes again into water and flows back through hundreds of miles down to the mother ocean. The seed produces the tree. The tree dies, leaving only the seed. Again it comes up, has another tree, which again ends in the seed, and so on. Look at a bird. Now, from the egg to the spring, look at the bird, how from the egg it springs, becomes a beautiful bird, lives its life and then dies, leaving only other eggs containing germ of future birds. So with the animals, so with the men, everything begins as it were from certain seeds, certain rudiment, certain fine forms, and becomes grosser and grosser as it develops, and then again it goes back to that fine form and subsides. The whole universe is going on in this way. There comes a time when this whole universe melts down and becomes finer, and at last disappears entirely as it were, but remains as superfine matter. We know through modern science and astronomy that this earth is cooling down, and in course of time it will become very cold, and then it will break to pieces and become finer and finer until it becomes ether once more. At the particle will all remain. At the particles will all remain to form the material out of which another earth will be projected. Again, that will disappear and another will come out. So, this universe will go back to its causes, and again, its materials will come together and take a form. Like the wave that goes down, rises again, and takes shape. The act of going back to causes and coming out again, taking form, is called in Sanskrit as Sankocha and Vikas. The act of going back to cause and coming out again, taking form, is called in Sanskrit as Sankocha and Vikas, which means shrinking and expand. The whole universe, Sankoch, shrinking, Vikas, expand. The whole universe has it where shrinks and then it expands again. To use the more accepted words of the modern science, they are involved and evolved. You hear about evolution, how all forms grow from lower ones, slowly growing up and up. This is very true. But each evolution presupposes an involution. We know that the sum total of energy that is displaced in the universe is the same at all times, and that matter is indestructible. By no means can you take away one particle of matter. You cannot take away a foot pound of the energy or add one. The sum total is the same always, only the manifestation varies, been evolved and involved. So, this cycle is the evolution out of the involution of the previous cycle, and this cycle will again be involved, getting finer and finer, and out of that will come the next cycle. The whole universe is going on in this fashion. Thus, we find that there is no creation in the sense that something is created out of nothing. To use a better word, there is a manifestation, and God is the manifestation of the universe. The universe has it where is been breathed out of him, and again it shrinks into him, and again he throws it out. A most beautiful simile is given in the Vedas, that eternal one breathed out this universe and breathed it in. That the eternal one breathed out this universe and breathes it in. Just as we can breathe out a little particle of dust and breathe in it again. That is all very good, but the question may be asked, how was it at the first cycle? The answer is, what is the meaning of the first cycle? There was none. If you can give a beginning to time, the whole concept of time will be destroyed. Try to think of a limit where time begin. You have to think of time beyond that limit. Try to think where space begin. You will have to think of the space beyond that limit. Time and space are infinite and therefore have neither beginning nor end. This is better idea than that God created the universe in 5 minutes and then went to sleep, and since that then has been sleeping. On the other hand, this idea will give us God as the eternal creator. Here is the series of waves rising and falling, and God is directing this eternal process. As the universe is without beginning and without end, so is God. We see that it must necessarily be so, because if if we say that there was a time when there was no creation, either in the gross or a fine form, then there was no God, because God is known to be used as sakshi, that is witness of the universe. When the universe did not exist, neither did he. One concept follows the other. The idea of the cause we get from the from the idea of the effect. The idea of the cause we get from the idea of the effect, and if there is no effect, there will be no cause. It naturally follows that as universe is eternal, God is eternal. The soul must also be eternal. Why? In the first place, we see that the soul is not a matter. It is neither a gross body nor a fine body, which we call mind or thought. It is neither the physical body nor what in Christianity is called a spiritual body. It is the gross body and the spiritual body that are liable to change. The gross body is liable to change almost every moment and dies, but the spiritual body endures through long period until one becomes free when it also falls away. When a man becomes free, the spiritual body despairs. The gross body disintegrates every time a man dies. The soul, not being made of any particular, must be indestructible. What do we mean by destruction? Destruction is in disintegration of material out of which anything is composed. Destruction is disintegration of materials out of which anything is composed. If this glass is broken into pieces, the material will disintegrate, and that will be the destruction of the glass. Disintegration of particles is what we mean by destruction. It naturally follows that none that is not composed of particles can be destroyed, can ever be disintegrated. The soul is not composed of any matter. It is united or unit, indivisible. It is unit indivisible. Therefore, it must be indestructible. The soul is not composed of any material. It is unite, indivisible. Therefore, it must be indestructible. For the same reason, it must also be without any beginning. So, soul is without any beginning and any end. We have entities. We have three entities. Here is nature, which is infinite but changeful. The whole nature is without beginning and end, but within it are multifarious changes. It is like the river that runs down to the sea for thousands of years. It is the same river always, but it is changing every minute. The particle of water and the changes are changing. The particles of water are changing their position constantly. Then there is God, unchangeable, the ruler, and there is the soul, unchangeable as God, eternal but under the ruler. One is the master, the other is a servant, and the third is the nature. One is the master, the other is a servant, and third is the nature. God being the cause of the projection, the continuous and dissolution of the universe. The cause must be present to produce the effect. Not only so, the cause becomes the effect. Glass is produced out of certain material and certain forces used by the manufacturer. In the glass, there are those forces plus the material. The forces used have become the forces of adhesion. And if that forces goes, the glass will fall to pieces. The material also are undoubtedly in glass. Only there is form is change. The cause has become the effect. Wherever you see the effect, you can always analyze it into a cause. The cause manifests itself as the effect. It follows if God is the cause of the universe is the effect, that God has become the universe. If the soul are the effect and God the cause, God has become the soul. Each soul, therefore, is a part of God. As from the mass of fire, an infinite number of sparks fly. Even so, from the eternal one, all this universe of souls has come out. We have seen that there is an eternal God and there is an eternal nature. And there is also an infinite number of eternal souls. This is the first stage in religion. It is called as dualism. The stage when man sees himself and God eternally separate. When the God is separate entity by himself and man is a separate entity by himself and nature is a separate entity by itself. This is dualism, which holds that the subject and the object are opposed to each other in everything. When man looks at nature, he is the subject and nature of the subject. When man looks at nature, he is the subject and nature of that particular subject or object. He seeks the dualism between the subject and the object. He sees the dualism between subject and the object. When he looks at God, he sees God as the object and himself as a subject. When he looks at God, he sees God as an object and sees himself as the subject. They are entirely separate. This is the dualism between man and God. This generally the first view of religion. They are separate, entirely separate. When he looks at God, he sees God as the object and himself as the subject. They are entirely separate. This is the dualism between man and God. This is generally the first view of religion. Then comes another view, which I have just shown to you. Men begin to find out that if God is a cause of the universe and the universe the effect, God himself must have become the universe and the souls, and he is but the particle of which God is the whole. We are but little beings, sparks of the mass of fire, and the whole universe is a manifestation of God himself. This is the next step. In Sanskrit, it is called as Vishishta Advait. In Sanskrit, it is called as Vishishta Advait. Just as I have this body, and this body covers the soul, and the soul is in and through this body. So, this whole universe is infinite soul, and nature forms as it were the body of God. When the period of evolution, when the period of involution comes, the universe becomes finer and finer, and yet remains the body of God. When the period of involution comes, the universe becomes finer and finer and yet remains the body of God. When the gross manifest when the gross manifestation comes, then also the universe remains the body of God. Just as human soul is soul of the human body and mind, so God is the soul of our souls. All of you have heard these expressions in every religion, soul of our souls. That is what is meant by it. He, as it were, resides in them, guides them, is the ruler of them all. In the first view of dualism, each one of us is an individual eternally separate from God and nature. In the second view, we are individuals but not separate from God. We are like little particles floating in one mass, and that mass is God. We are individuals, but one in God. We are all in Him. We are all part of Him, and therefore we are one. And yet, between man and God, and there is a strict individuality, separate and yet not separate. And yet, between man and God, and there is a strict individuality, separate and yet not separate. Then comes a still finer question. The question is, can infinity have parts? What is meant by parts of infinity? If you reason it out, you will find that it is impossible. Infinity cannot be divided. It always remains infinite. It is, if it could be divided, each part would be infinite. And there cannot be two infinites. Suppose there were one would limit the other, and both would become finite. Infinite can only be one, undivided. Thus, the conclusion will be reached that the infinite is one and not many, and that one infinite soul is reflecting itself through thousands and thousands of mirrors. Thus, the conclusion will be reached that the infinite is one and not many, and that one infinite soul is reflecting itself through thousands and thousands of mirrors, appearing as so many different souls. It is the same infinite soul which is the background of the universe, and that we call God. The same infinite soul also is the background of the human mind, which we call the human soul. It is the same infinite soul which is the background of the universe, that we call God. The same infinite soul also is the background of the human mind, which we call the human soul.